The New York Times admits President Trump was right about remarks he made on Muslim migration into Sweden. One American's Kristian Rouz has more.
The New York Times backtracks on its dismissal of the migrant crisis in Europe as a right-wing conspiracy. In a recent article, the Times admitted Muslim migrants are terrorizing towns and suburbs in Sweden with unprecedented violence and ferocity, and are even using lethal military-grade weapons. This comes roughly a year after the paper mocked the last night in Sweden remarks made by President Trump, dismissing the notion of rampant migrant crime as untrue.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden! Who would believe this? Sweden! They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
Despite coming to its senses on the issue of mass migration, the New York Times is struggling to admit where the migrant violence comes from and what motivates their silence. The publication avoids using the words Muslim, migrant and refugee, albeit these three categories define the nature of the ongoing civilizational onslaught against Europe.
Last night, the police were attacked. An explosion detonated on the police yard. The attack is very serious. It's serious because it's systematically planned to damage the democratic system, but also the work of the police.
Over the past 3 years, a wave of Muslim migrant crime has overwhelmed European nations, admitting larger numbers of so-called refugees fleeing the Middle East amidst the raging Syrian conflict. The Stockholm metropolitan area alone has seen more than 100 incidents involving the use of grenades, submachine guns and other military-grade weapons and ammunition since 2015, with Islamic mass migration along the infamous Balkan route reinforcing the illicit trade in arms from southern Europe into Scandinavia.
I'm extremely frustrated with the fact that the Security Council, that we have not been able to adopt a resolution to try to alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people. Yes, I'm very frustrated with that.
According to Swedish police, after the country admitted more than 100,000 Islamic refugees, the majority of whom are able-bodied fighting-age males, gang warfare and sexual violence have become a particularly acute problem. Several reports suggest the percentage of Swedish women who became victims of sex offences rose from 1.2% in 2012 to 4.1% in 2016 and counting ever since. The widely publicized sexual assaults during Sweden's open-air festivals are also connected to mass migration, as over two-thirds of apprehended suspects in such cases are non-Swedish and non-EU citizens.
Yet another gang rape has happened in Malmö. Today we are here to support the woman who was raped here in Fittja earlier. We will not accept nor allow something like this from happening without a reaction.
The New York Times also fails to acknowledge it is the culture of political correctness that's failing Sweden, where it's not welcome to point out connections between mass migration and crime. However, widespread public backlash in Sweden against the devastating consequences of mass migration have prompted Prime Minister Stefan Löfven to implement measures to tackle gang and sex crimes. These include deploying military personnel to towns and suburbs to ensure security, as the government is still fighting the symptoms rather than the cause.
I don't think they are a problem, like they're a little human like me, but I think it's quite scary when you read on the news about like they attacking people, so yeah, I feel a bit scared sometimes.
The New York Times has since changed its tone, covering the mass Islamic migration into Europe, disguised as humanitarian admissions of refugees. However, the Times' latest piece is still a far cry from a murky warning to the American public of the disastrous consequences to public safety and national identity posed by unlimited admissions of cultural aliens. Kristian, Rouz, One American News.
We can use your help. Call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call today.